Emily Turner always thought she knew her husband, David, but the moment she opened a single locked closet, her entire world shattered. What she discovered would reveal a decade-long lie, a secret life as a fake cop that no one could have imagined. For 10 years, Emily Turner believed she had the perfect life with her husband, David. From the outside, their marriage looked flawless. They lived in a tidy suburban home, hosted dinner parties for friends, and maintained a calm and orderly household that many envied. David was always attentive, ensuring that Emily felt safe and cared for. He claimed to work as a police officer in the city's Special Investigations Unit, a job that demanded long hours and immense dedication. Emily admired his commitment, and the thought that her husband risked his life every day filled her with both pride and anxiety. His uniform hung neatly in the closet, his badge was displayed carefully on the dresser, and he always seemed prepared to leave for work at a moment's notice. He spoke often about cases and operations, though he rarely shared specific details. Emily understood that secrecy was part of his profession and never pressed for more information, telling herself that this was simply the reality of loving a law enforcement officer. As years passed, small inconsistencies began to emerge, though Emily ignored them. David's schedule was always irregular. He often claimed to be on call or assigned to confidential operations that required him to disappear for days at a time. Invitations to meet his colleagues or attend events were always denied, citing security protocols and confidentiality. Emily accepted these excuses because she trusted him completely. When she ran into neighbors who mentioned seeing him at community events, he quickly explained that undercover work often kept him away from public appearances. While most couples share stories about their workplace and colleagues, David's world remained a mystery. Emily tried not to question it, telling herself that his dedication to protecting the city demanded sacrifice. Despite the appearances of a happy life, Emily sometimes felt a lingering unease she couldn't explain. She noticed that David's phone was always locked, and he guarded his email accounts and personal files with intense secrecy. He rarely shared details about his work, and when pressed, he skillfully diverted the conversation to other topics. The more Emily tried to piece together his life, the more the fragments seemed to avoid forming a coherent picture. She rationalized these feelings, convincing herself that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and that perhaps she was overthinking harmless quirks. Yet the nagging sense that something was off refused to disappear entirely. David's presence was both comforting and controlling. He carefully curated his image as a dedicated officer and devoted husband, creating a reality that was hard to question. Friends often praised Emily for having a husband who seemed both heroic and reliable. She basked in the admiration, yet deep inside, a quiet doubt began to grow. Her intuition whispered that the life she believed she knew might not be as real as it seemed. Every unexplained absence, every cryptic comment about off-duty operations, and every secretive glance added pieces to a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to complete. Emily's perfect marriage was built on appearances, and though she couldn't see it yet, the foundation she trusted so completely was about to shatter in ways she could never have imagined. The sense of unease she carried quietly for years was only the first whisper of a truth, far more unsettling than she could have ever predicted. One humid afternoon, Emily's carefully constructed sense of normalcy began to unravel. She received an unexpected call from the city impound lot, a place she had never needed to visit before. The clerk on the phone explained that a car registered under her husband's name had been towed from an alley downtown. Confused, she asked for more details and was told she would need to retrieve it in person. Driving through the city, her mind raced with questions. David had never mentioned driving a vehicle that could end up in such a situation. When she arrived at the lot, the sight of the car made her stomach twist with unease. It was an unmarked sedan, ordinary at first glance, but the moment she approached, she noticed things that were impossible to ignore. The interior was filled with flashing lights, a siren control box, and equipment that resembled police gear. Handcuffs, radios, and vests marked police were scattered in the back seat and trunk. But they looked cheap and slightly off, like props rather than official equipment. The clerk handed her the keys and mentioned something unusual. The car was registered as privately owned, not part of any city fleet or police department inventory. Emily's heart began to race. She tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Why would David, a police officer, need such a vehicle if it wasn't officially issued to him? She returned home with the car in tow, each minute building tension in her chest. That night, she waited quietly for him to come home. When David arrived, his reaction to seeing the car back in the driveway was fleetingly revealing. There was a momentary flash of shock, a hesitation before he spoke, but he quickly covered it with an explanation that he was working undercover and could not discuss the details. Emily nodded, unsure whether to believe him. The unease she felt had intensified into something heavier, more insistent. Over the following days, David's behavior began to change. He grew more secretive and erratic, leaving the house at odd hours and returning with vague stories that never quite added up. Emily noticed him handling the equipment from the car with careful precision, almost obsessively, locking it away in a metal box hidden in the closet. She tried to rationalize the situation, telling herself that undercover work might require such measures, but doubt had taken root. Every glance at the car, every locked closet door, and every unexplained absence chipped away at the trust she had built for so many years. She began to watch him more closely, noting patterns in his movements and searching for inconsistencies in his explanations. Her curiosity became a quiet obsession. She wondered how someone could maintain such a dual existence, balancing a seemingly normal family life with the secret world David claimed to inhabit. Each piece of evidence, from the impounded car to the strange behavior surrounding it, seemed to hint at a reality far more complicated than anything she had imagined. Questions multiplied. Was he really an officer? If not, what was the purpose of the car, the badges, the gear? The uncertainty gnawed at her, leaving her both fearful and determined. As she stared at the unmarked sedan sitting in their driveway, she realized that the life she had trusted for a decade might be built entirely on deception. The first cracks in her marriage had appeared, and Emily understood that the next steps she took could lead to truths far darker and more dangerous than she had ever prepared for. One evening, Emily's growing unease reached a breaking point. David had left the metal box in the closet slightly ajar, a rare lapse in his otherwise meticulous routine. Compelled by a mixture of fear and desperation, Emily opened it. Inside were folders, dozens of them, each labeled with a different name and address. She pulled out one folder and froze. Her own name stared back at her, written neatly on the tab. Trembling, she opened it and discovered copies of her birth certificate, bank statements, utility bills, and photographs taken without her knowledge. Each item was carefully organized, cataloged as if someone had been meticulously planning to know everything about her. Beneath these documents were identification cards, fake IDs with David's photograph but different names and titles. Daniel Cross, Officer Reed, Detective Cole. Each carried a different badge number, a different persona. Emily's stomach sank as the implications of the discovery hit her. The man she had trusted completely, the man she had built her life around, was living multiple lives under false identities. Her hands shook as she sifted through the folders, realizing that the deceptions were not limited to her. There were dozens of other people listed with personal details that suggested a long history of manipulation and intrusion into the lives of unsuspecting victims. Everything David had told her about his career now seemed like an elaborate lie. He had never been a legitimate police officer. Every badge, every uniform, every story about dangerous operations was fabricated. The evidence in the closet revealed a disturbing pattern of deception, carefully constructed over many years. Emily felt a chilling mix of betrayal, fear, and disbelief. The reality of her marriage, once a source of security, had shifted into something unrecognizable, a house built on lies rather than trust. Unable to ignore the truth, Emily turned to official sources. She contacted the local police department, hoping for clarity. Within hours, investigators confirmed her worst fears. David Turner did not exist in their records as an officer, past or present. The badges, the car, the uniform, everything was fake. The items he had surrounded himself with were not tools of law enforcement, but props designed to convince others of a false authority. The officers who responded were professional but cautious, warning Emily not to confront him directly. The scope of the deception went far beyond personal lies. It was criminal in nature. She was informed that David had been impersonating a police officer, a felony that carried serious consequences. The relief that came with finally knowing the truth was quickly replaced by terror. She had lived alongside a man who was capable of manipulating the law, exploiting the trust of others, and hiding his true self behind the mask of authority. As the reality sank in, Emily reflected on the years she had spent in ignorance. The subtle inconsistencies, the vague explanations, the unusual absences, all were now pieces of a puzzle that fit together too neatly to be coincidence. The man she had married, the one she had loved and trusted completely, had built a secret life so elaborate that it had fooled everyone around him, including her. Her home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap she had unknowingly lived inside. The folders and fake IDs were not just evidence of lies, they were evidence of a dangerous mind capable of deception on an almost unimaginable scale. Emily realized that the life she had thought she knew was gone. The truth she now faced was frighteningly clear. The husband she believed she knew did not exist. And in his place was a stranger who had meticulously constructed a reality that was never real. As the investigation unfolded, the horrifying extent of David's double life began to emerge. Authorities discovered that his deception was far more elaborate than Emily could have imagined. For years, he had posed as a law enforcement officer, using his fabricated identity to gain trust and manipulate those around him. He frequented neighborhoods, community events, and even local businesses, presenting himself as a protector of the public while quietly collecting personal information for his own gain. People who thought they were speaking to a real officer were actually interacting with a man who had carefully studied the behaviors and language of law enforcement to appear credible. Every detail, from the way he carried himself to the uniform and the car, was meticulously designed to convince others of his legitimacy. Emily struggled to process the depth of the betrayal. The man who had shared her home, her life, and her secrets had been living a parallel existence, one that preyed on the trust of the very community he claimed to serve. Authorities uncovered evidence of financial fraud linked to David's fake law enforcement activities. He had convinced people that he could offer protection, solve legal problems, or remove threats on their behalf. In reality, these were schemes to extort money, collect personal information, and commit identity theft. Bank statements and digital records revealed hidden accounts filled with payments from victims who had believed they were working with a legitimate officer. Every alias, every fake badge, and every stolen identity was part of a system he had perfected over many years. Emily learned that his actions were not isolated incidents, but part of a sustained effort to exploit and deceive. The realization was crushing. The man she had trusted implicitly had spent a decade building a network of lies that reached far beyond their home. As detectives pieced together his activities, it became clear that David's ability to deceive was enhanced by his careful study of police procedure and his deep understanding of human behavior. He knew how to appear authoritative, how to intimidate without overt violence, and how to make people believe they were receiving legitimate assistance. His victims ranged from small business owners to private citizens who simply sought guidance or protection. Each encounter reinforced his false identity, allowing him to maintain the illusion of a law enforcement career while continuing to live a normal family life with Emily. She realized that while she had been focused on minor inconsistencies, he had been orchestrating a life that was completely separate from the one she believed existed. Emily struggled to reconcile the man she had loved with the criminal mastermind revealed by the investigation. Every memory, every shared moment, every word spoken over the years now felt tainted by deceit. The home that had once felt safe became a reminder of the stranger who had walked among her, carefully hiding his true nature. Friends and neighbors who had praised her for marrying a dedicated officer were equally shocked to learn the truth. David's deception had been so convincing that it fooled even experienced law enforcement officers during brief interactions. The revelation left Emily questioning everything about her life, her marriage, and the man she had once trusted completely. She was forced to confront the painful truth that the person she had known was a fabrication, a carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate, control, and exploit both her and the wider community. The scope of the betrayal was overwhelming, leaving her grappling with fear, disbelief, and the dawning awareness that her world had been built entirely on a lie. The night of David's arrest was surreal, a moment Emily had imagined in countless scenarios but never truly believed would happen. Police quietly surrounded their suburban home just after midnight, their vehicles casting sharp beams of red and blue light across the driveway. Emily sat in the living room, her body tense and heart racing, watching as officers moved with precision, speaking only in clipped whispers over radios. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway made her flinch. She knew David was inside, returning from one of his late-night excursions, unaware that the truth of his actions had already caught up with him. When he finally walked through the front door carrying a duffel bag, the sudden illumination from the flashing lights revealed a mixture of shock and disbelief on his face. The contents of the bag were unmistakable: fake uniforms, counterfeit badges, handcuffs, radios, and other props that had been part of his decade-long charade. David froze, his carefully constructed persona unraveling in a single moment. The officers moved in silently, giving him no time to react. Without a word, he raised his hands and allowed himself to be handcuffed. Emily felt a mixture of relief and horror. The man who had shared her bed, her meals, her life, was no longer the person she had known. Investigators later revealed that his career as a fake police officer had spanned nearly 10 years and stretched across 3 different states. He had assumed multiple identities, each one meticulously crafted to gain trust and avoid detection. Even in routine encounters with actual law enforcement, his knowledge of procedures and authoritative presence had allowed him to maintain the illusion convincingly. For Emily, the realization that she had lived alongside a master deceiver was both terrifying and deeply painful. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of David's crimes came to light. Authorities discovered victims who had been manipulated into paying him, sharing sensitive personal information, and trusting his advice in matters they believed were legal and official. Every badge, every fake ID, and every fabricated story was part of a systematic effort to exploit and control. Emily learned that the man she had once thought of as devoted and heroic had been preying on innocent people while maintaining the appearance of normalcy at home. The shock of knowing that the life she had trusted for so long was built entirely on lies left her feeling unmoored. Friends and family expressed disbelief and sympathy, but no explanation could erase the sense of betrayal that weighed heavily on her. Emily eventually moved out of the house, leaving behind the physical space that had been filled with so much deception. Each item left behind, David's uniforms, the fake badges, the folders filled with personal information, served as a chilling reminder of the reality she had unknowingly lived with. The media picked up the story, highlighting the extraordinary lengths David had gone to maintain his false identity and the terrifying consequences for those who had crossed paths with him. Emily's life, once ordinary and secure, had become a cautionary tale, a stark illustration of how appearances can mask a darker truth. Though the legal process moved forward and David faced charges for impersonation, fraud, and identity theft, Emily had to grapple with the emotional aftermath. Every memory, every shared moment of trust and intimacy was now clouded with the knowledge that she had never truly known the man beside her. The home they had shared, the life they had built together, was a carefully staged illusion, and Emily was left to reconstruct her understanding of the world, learning to trust again in the wake of one of the most elaborate betrayals imaginable. The story of her husband's secret life as a fake cop would linger long after the trial, a haunting reminder that deception can hide in the most intimate places, and the people we love most may not be who they seem.